Sometimes the past returns in unexpected ways, quietly, almost gently, as if the years between then and now never really passed. And the more people look back at what happened decades ago, the more questions they find themselves facing. In the late 1980s, in a quiet community on the northwest coast of England, an incident unfolded that stayed in local memory for generations. Today, that same incident is being reviewed again, not for dramatic effect and not for shock value, but for a simple reason: to understand what truly happened back then, and why one man spent almost his entire adult life behind bars for something that, according to later findings, he had not been responsible for. The story begins with a man named Peter Sullivan, whose name appeared in newspapers and official documents for many years. Those who have spoken to him in recent times say that he carries the weight of those decades, and that the experience shaped his life in ways he still struggles to explain. Even now, after so much time has passed, certain questions continue to surface. One of them is simple but unsettling. How did the original investigation lead to such serious consequences for a man who, years later, was found not to have been involved? According to Peter, the events of those early days left a lasting mark on him. After his release, he explained that the memories of that period would remain with him for the rest of his life. He described feeling pressure and confusion during the first stages of his detention, and said that he did not have the legal support he needed at the time. His initial statement, the one he later withdrew, was made under circumstances that were eventually described as deeply problematic. Archived materials from that era confirmed that his statement was later ruled unreliable. Decades after the original conviction, his case was reopened, examined again, and ultimately overturned by the court. Officials stated that a serious mistake had been made, and acknowledged that the procedures used at the time were far from ideal. When the decision was announced, representatives of the local police force expressed regret about the situation and noted that what had happened highlighted issues from that period that required further review. In late 2023, authorities reopened the investigation into the events of 1986. The decision followed new scientific tests on materials preserved from the original case. These tests revealed traces belonging to an unidentified individual, details that investigators of the time would not have been able to analyze with the same precision. As a result, officers began an extensive voluntary screening process, asking individuals who lived in or around the community during that period to provide samples to help narrow down the search. According to official statements, more than 400 people have taken part so far. Those individuals included relatives, acquaintances, and others whose names appeared in documents from the original investigation. All of them were formally excluded from further consideration. Police representatives also explained that the screening process extended far beyond the local area. Samples were collected in multiple cities, including London, Newcastle, Hull, Swansea, and Perth. Many people came forward on their own, understanding how important even the smallest piece of information could be. And yet, despite the scale of the effort, no confirmed match has been found, which means that, after all these years, the story still has unanswered questions. As investigators revisited the materials from 1986, they found that many details from the original case were still preserved in the archives. These documents described a young woman named Diane, who at that time was known in her community as a quiet, hard-working person. She was engaged, building a future, and working as a florist, a profession that many said suited her gentle personality. According to accounts from that year, Diane was driving home late in the evening when her car ran out of fuel. People familiar with the case explained that she decided to walk toward a nearby petrol station, carrying a container to refill. The distance was short, only a few hundred yards, but it was enough to place her on a dimly lit stretch of road that residents later described as isolated during late hours. What happened next was the focus of the original investigation. Early reports mentioned signs of a struggle, and official documents described a series of injuries that led to serious consequences for her health. Though medical teams responded, they noted that her condition could not be stabilized. In later summaries, it was stated that her life could not be saved. These reports became the basis for what authorities later referred to as a major incident inquiry. It involved multiple departments and expanded far beyond the local area. Investigators searched nearby woods, parks, and residential zones. Items belonging to Diane were found in different locations, some at a significant distance from where she was last seen. Local newspapers from the time described the community as deeply unsettled. Residents talked quietly among themselves, and people were hesitant to walk outside alone. Many said it was difficult to understand how such an incident could unfold so close to home. During that first investigation, several individuals were questioned. Among them was Peter Sullivan. Documents from that period show that he had spent the evening playing darts at a nearby pub. Officers brought him in for questioning shortly after the incident. Over the following days, he was interviewed multiple times. His initial statement, which he later withdrew, became the foundation of the case against him. And even though he repeatedly said that it was not accurate, the original court accepted it as evidence. Only many years later did officials acknowledge that the circumstances surrounding that admission were deeply concerning. Another man had also been questioned during the 1986 investigation. He was released shortly after and not charged, and when modern DNA analysis became available decades later, he too was formally excluded from involvement. For years, the case remained closed in the public eye, a chapter many believed would never be revisited. But as scientific methods evolved, samples preserved from that time were tested again. That new testing revealed the presence of an unidentified male contributor, prompting authorities to reopen the entire investigation. This turn of events reshaped everything. It meant that someone whose name never appeared in the original case files might still hold answers. It also meant that many of the early assumptions were incomplete or incorrect. Officials emphasized that they were not assigning guilt or making definitive statements about anyone's involvement. Instead, the renewed investigation focused on building a clearer timeline and understanding the full picture from a modern perspective. The community, especially those who remembered Diane, followed the developments closely. Older residents recalled the atmosphere of 1986, the uncertainty, and the sense that something important had been missed. For them, the reopening of the case brought back memories of long conversations and unanswered questions. And as the search for answers continued, investigators hoped that someone, perhaps someone who had stayed silent at the time, or someone who had moved away, might come forward with information that had been forgotten or overlooked. As a result, officers began an extensive voluntary screening process, asking individuals who lived in or around the community during that period to provide samples to help narrow down the search. According to official statements, more than 400 people have taken part so far. Those individuals included relatives, acquaintances, and others whose names appeared in documents from the original investigation. All of them were formally excluded from further consideration. Police representatives also explained that the screening process extended far beyond the local area. Samples were collected in multiple cities, including London, Newcastle, Hull, Swansea, and Perth. Many people came forward on their own, understanding how important even the smallest piece of information could be. And yet, despite the scale of the effort, no confirmed match has been found. Which means that, after all these years, the story still has unanswered questions. The renewed investigation also revisited events from the original inquiry. Officials looked closely at the people who had been questioned in 1986 and at the way the case had been handled. Archival documents show that some officers involved in the earlier investigation had previously faced scrutiny over other cases. Records suggest that in those instances, there had been procedural flaws, which later drew criticism from independent reviewers. One senior investigator from that time, Superintendent Tom Baxter, had overseen multiple high-profile inquiries, including a case involving a young paperboy many years prior. Those events, later reviewed, highlighted the importance of careful evidence management and following proper procedures, lessons that shaped how the reopened investigation was conducted decades later. In 2023, police issued a public appeal for information, Authorities emphasized that anyone with knowledge of the 1986 events could help identify the source of the unidentified DNA. The statements from officials were careful. They did not assign blame or accuse anyone directly. Instead, they asked anyone who remembered relevant details or had suspicions to come forward, noting that even seemingly small pieces of information could be critical. As the screening of volunteers continued, investigators focused on building a timeline, confirming locations, and cross-referencing witness accounts. The process was slow, meticulous, and aimed at accuracy rather than speed. Those following the case observed that it demonstrated the evolution of investigative methods over decades, from the original interviews and evidence collection to modern DNA analysis and archival research. For the local community, the case remained significant. Older residents recalled the original events, and many spoke about the impact it had on their perception of safety in the neighborhood. They remembered quiet streets that suddenly seemed tense, and the long months when uncertainty lingered over the area. The reopening of the investigation gave them a sense that, after all these years, the truth might still be uncovered, and that closure, in the form of answers, could eventually be achieved. Experts in cold cases have noted that such reopenings are both challenging and necessary. They require patience, careful review of old materials, and respect for all individuals involved. In this instance, the combination of archival research and modern technology offered new hope. Even decades later, new evidence could be interpreted, helping to correct past errors without attributing fault unfairly. As the investigation continues, one message remains clear. The story is not about assigning blame, but about uncovering facts and understanding what happened. It is also a reminder of how long the effects of an investigation can linger on the lives of those involved, both individuals directly affected and the wider community that witnessed the unfolding events. Over time, many residents and observers have found that the story of 1986 has left a lasting impression. It illustrates the importance of careful investigation, the power of modern science, and the human consequences of decisions made under pressure. Even today, people continue to discuss the events, reflect on the lessons, and hope that the remaining questions will one day find answers. And so, the story remains open-ended. The case is still active, new information is being sought, and the community watches, aware that while decades have passed, the pursuit of clarity and understanding continues. This story reminds us all to remain observant, patient, and compassionate. Even when justice is slow, the truth can still be pursued, and every effort to uncover it matters. As a result, officers began an extensive voluntary screening process, asking individuals who lived in or around the community during that period to provide samples to help narrow down the search. According to official statements, more than 400 people have taken part so far. Those individuals included relatives, acquaintances, and others whose names appeared in documents from the original investigation. All of them were formally excluded from further consideration. Police representatives also explained that the screening process extended far beyond the local area. Samples were collected in multiple cities, including London, Newcastle, Hull, Swansea, and Perth. Many people came forward on their own, understanding how important even the smallest piece of information could be. And yet, despite the scale of the effort, no confirmed match has been found. Which means that, after all these years, the story still has unanswered questions.